looking at how climate change is affecting storms and sea level rise. So let's go to it. Okay, so we're going to get increased extreme weather, more changing rain patterns, and of course, flooding because we have a lot of coastal communities. And sea level is on the rise. So here you can see a chart showing how sea level has been increasing over the years. So the angle of the chart is getting greater. And so it went from sea level rise being like 0.6 millimeters per year to 4.4 millimeters per year. Again, that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you just keep piling on the years, then that makes a big difference. Right now, sea levels have risen by about 8 inches around the world. It's not the same everywhere. Some places might have only 6 inches, other places might have 10 or 12. As it turns out, the east coast of the United States is one of the places where sea level rise will be higher than some other parts of the world. For gravitational reasons, um, water that melts in Antarctica ends up on the east coast. Anyway, so what we're having is already problems on the east coast of the United States because of sea level rise. Um, so anyway, 8 inches again doesn't seem like a lot, but if you were 8 inches taller, that would change your life. And a step of 8 inches helps you get up to places you can't otherwise reach. So the same thing happens in the ocean. That extra 8 inches, put that in with a high tide, and all of a sudden water gets places it couldn't get before. And so 8 inches helped Hurricane Sandy get into the subways of New York City. So Hurricane Sandy in 2012 actually brought water into New York City, and the subway system had to be redone because of the total damage from the salt water. Anyway, and this storm was so unusual. It was the largest energy storm that had been recorded, where it had kinetic energy of about 222 trillion joules, and that energy allowed it to get higher. And so the thing is that we're putting more energy into the atmosphere. That energy is in storms. Now, there's also more moisture in the air. As you warm up the atmosphere can hold more moisture. For every degree Fahrenheit rise in temperature, the atmosphere can hold 4% more moisture. For every degree centigrade, that's about 7 to 8% more moisture. And as our planet warms, if we're going to see 6, 7, 8 more degrees Fahrenheit, then that means we're going to have 20 to 30 more percent moisture in our air. Anyway, so what that does is we have storms that can dump more water. So Hurricane Harvey that hit Houston was known for the fact that it just sat there and dumped rain at record levels. And that's another thing that happens is that when the storms used to pass through quickly, but now they tend to just go slowly because basically we broke the jet stream. Um, the uh, the speed of a storm depends on having a big difference, usually between the colder north and the warmer equator. And what we've done is we've made the north warmer, and that slows the storm down. So North Carolina and Florida and other places are having storms that just sit there and dump water, which they have more of. So you get flooding on land. Now, there's a very good video, okay, another one by Henry here. And so those are linked um, on the website, okay, so you can go watch that. Okay, and there's some other videos here if you're interested in going to those. They also explain how hurricanes get stronger. Now, here's a chart showing predicted rises. That was only 2013. I need to find another copy of this and update it. But I did update it with words. So what happens is that, again, this shows some predictions. And what the IPCC is that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, so they have been putting out predictions for a while. They are groups of scientists that got together under the United Nations. A lot of them don't work for pay here, but they try to find the best research about climate change, and they put out reports. So one of the reports that they put out, we're talking about the best case scenario, would be this blue line down here. And that would be if we had only a 1 degree Celsius temperature rise. Okay, it doesn't look like we're going to be 1 degree. We're already around there. And so then the sea level would rise about 1.5 to 2.5 feet. In the case of their what they called their worst case scenario, then by 2100, the sea level would rise due to a 3.7 degree rise in temperature. That would be this pink area here. So they were thinking that sea level would rise about 3 to 4 feet. However, some ice sheet experts got together and they noticed how fast glaciers were melting. And they said, oh no, it's going to be more. So their prediction was in 2013 that by 2100 there would be a sea level rise of from 4 to 5.5 feet. Okay, now in 2016, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration put out an estimate where they said, no, it's probably going to be closer to maybe 8 feet is possible. So this person, who you can imagine standing on a beach, now is well underwater. And so if you can imagine that a place where you have enjoyed a beach is now way underwater, and how that water will come in to the beach and drown the houses and things. So anyway, so yes, so we don't really know how much exactly water there's going to be. It depends on how much the temperature rises, and it depends on how fast the glaciers melt. But it's not going to be non-existent. There is water rising already. Now, a lot of times high tides plus this extra water cause a lot of damage. And so this is after Hurricane Katrina, where New Orleans is basically already underwater. That's why they have walls to keep the water out. And so in this case, the walls failed and water came into the city of New Orleans. And so that's part of the thing, is how are we going to protect our cities along the coast? Now, it also depends on what kind of coast you have, how much damage there will be. So the East Coast has a gently shelving coast. So for every foot of sea level rise, then what you might have is maybe 10 feet of shoreline shift, right? So where the shore would shift inwards because it's gentle. But in the West Coast, where you have more rocky cliffs and stuff like that, then you don't get as big a shoreline shift. But you also don't start out usually with beaches that are as wide. And so a lot of beaches are disappearing on the West Coast already. Okay, so East Coast, who's at risk? Well, Florida, of course. And here's New Orleans. And here's Houston area. But up here, we've got in the Virginias, and we've got up to Boston and New York. Those are all places that are vulnerable. And so any place you see red here, those are places that are only around, that depends on what color. Some places that are very dark red or black are only a foot or two above sea level. And lots of Florida is only about 5 feet or so above sea level. So anyway, so this is a very dangerous situation because waves are often more than 5 feet. And if you add 2 or 3 feet of sea level change, then you've got a big problem. Now, there's some excellent videos, and I put the Miami City Solution one so that you can watch it. It's really good. It's telling what they're doing in Miami because water is already going into the city of Miami. They're already having what they call sunny day flooding, where there's no rain, but the streets get flooded because water backs up basically through the drainage system, so it's like, in front of our houses, we have in the streets, there are grates to carry water down to the river eventually. But the idea is that what if our river got high enough that water backed up? Well, that's what's happening in Florida during high tides. Along with climate change, that water now backs up into Florida. Saltwater is intruding also across the state. And saltwater intrusion can cause a lot of problems we'll talk about a little bit. But anyway, go watch the video. And here you can see how what's been happening is that with high tides, the Miami Beach has been flooding more and more over this last decade, 2 decades. Here's showing how saltwater can eat away the coast. So here's inside the National Wildlife Refuge. Saltwater gets in there and it eats away at the peaty soil. And so this was where the shore was located, and it has been eaten away to this. Also, that saltwater kills the trees. You can see dead trees here. And that produces what's called a ghost forest. And those are all up and down the East Coast where saltwater is coming in and killing off forests because it backs up into them. Farmers are having this problem too with saltwater getting into their cropland because a lot of Florida being very flat, they dug canals to carry salt water out to the ocean, or carry fresh water. Anyway, just to drain the swamp. Okay, so they drained the wetlands and turned it into farmland. Well, the salt water is pushing its way up those canals back up into those areas that used to be wetlands. And once you get salt in a field, then usually you can't grow normal crops. You have to grow crops that can only grow with salt water, and there aren't that many. Okay, some of the places that are most at risk, one of them is Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh is in that corner where India comes down like this, right? And then there's Myanmar over here, and parts of India over here. And then you have this little country called Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is basically just a river delta. So this is where the Brahmaputra and the Ganges River come down, and they bring a lot of soil, and they built a delta. And that basically is what they're on, the people there. So it's very low lying, and it's very susceptible to storms that come zooming up and flood them from this way, while the rivers flood them from this direction. And now we've got the sea level rising. So Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable spots. And they already have a lot of trouble with flooding. They even have planted their crops on rafts. They keep trying to switch things that they can do, because they can't grow crops. Then they start doing crab farming. They do all sorts of things. They're trying to find a way to make a living. And these people could be a lot of the first climate change refugees, people who have to leave their homes because they can't live there anymore because of climate change. So anyway, here it was very cool. Bangladeshi actually made an action plan based on climate change. And they went in and they sent people to the villages and they told the villagers, look, this is going to happen. What can we do? What can you guys do if the flooding starts? What are some of the options? And so they worked with villages and then they came up to the regional level and they finally got a national plan. And so anyway, but it was very good. They went to the villages first to prepare them and to get ideas. Okay, other places that are at risk are other low-lying lands and islands. Some islands are so low that the water just has to rise a few feet and they're no longer habitable. So the Maldives are these famous islands which have an incredible blue color of the ocean and very popular for tourists, but only 3 feet of sea level rise would make them uninhabitable. So uninhabitable usually means that the water gets into the fields, the water gets into the water supply, the wells, and so you can't make food to eat or you can't have water to drink. So that's pretty uninhabitable. Another thing that happens is that as the water rises, it's destroying the beaches or making them narrower. And most people go there for the beaches. Climate change will also kill off coral reefs, which also makes them less attractive for tourists to come to. So another set of islands, the Seychelles, and that's got 87,000 people. And again, only 3 feet is needed. And they're already covering the beaches, reducing the tourists there. The seas are doing that. Palau is already having eroded coasts and the farms are tainted. And that hosts 20,000 people. And the Solomon Islands and Micronesia have some islands at risk, not all of them. One of the smallest island nations is the Kiribati Islands out in the Pacific. And Tarawa is their main island. And this is it. Tarawa is just this long, stringy piece of beach, this reef. And most of it is less than 8 feet above sea level, but it's got 106,000 people living off it. And already it's contaminating their fresh water. It's reducing the land available. And they're trying to figure out how to move their people somewhere else. So they're in talks with Fiji to see about buying some land to relocate all their people. Now, where are they going to get the money to do that? Well, one of the things is with the Paris Accord, when countries join that, they help donate money to what's called a green fund. And one of the priorities of the green fund is to help people to move, as well as people to stabilize where they live. But in this case, that's one of the places Fiji would get the money. The green fund is available. And of course, that's one of the things that the United States needs to pay. The richer countries paying to help out the poorer countries, the ones who didn't cause the problem, and help them to adjust to climate change. Okay, so other countries that are most at risk, it turns out China is one of the countries most at risk. China has some very low-lying parts because there's a giant river delta due to the Yellow River. And it comes down and it's the most fertile part of China, a big plain caused by the river materials coming down year after year. Anyway, so the problem is that that's about 50 million people living in that area, which is only 4% of their population, but it's like the best land in China. It's where most of their crops are grown. Vietnam also has some low-lying areas. That would be about 26% of their population. Japan, about 10%. India, only 1% of their population. But that's still 12 million people. Bangladesh, there's that. They're number 5. Indonesia, Thailand, and the first European country here, the Netherlands. The Netherlands is basically underwater. I'll show you a picture in a minute. But yeah, if the water came in, it would affect about 47% of their population. Now, notice where the United States is. We are way down here at number 11. And you might want to write these down because this looks like a multiple choice question to me. So anyway, so the United States is number 11. It could affect about 3 million people, which is only about 1% of our population. But that means that people are going to have to move away from the coast quite a bit, or there's a lot of adaptation that needs to take place. And this is already happening. Every time there's another flood or hurricane on the coastline, then what happens is some people never move back. And especially if they don't have enough insurance to rebuild, then they leave. So anyway, there's a happy little film about how to avoid the next Atlantis. And so that's another one you might watch. It's got some really cool ideas in it. Pay special attention. They talk about the when waves are coming in, how to keep those waves from being higher by planting mangroves and having wetlands. Okay, so that's something that helps protect us. So that's in there too. Okay, so anyway, how much water would it take to start drowning places? Well, this picture is just for fun, but this is showing a 6-meter rise in sea level, so there's a fake picture. But it would show what would happen if like 18 feet. So that's not going to happen probably this century. But London is vulnerable. It's on a river that leads to the sea. It is a port. It has tides that come up. So anyway, so yes, so that's where London is in there. And here you can see the Netherlands. They show it in blue because it actually is mostly underwater already. And like we talked about earlier, the dikes help keep the water out, and the windmills pump water out because these were wetlands that were recovered from the sea, and you have to keep pumping water out or else the sea will come back in. Okay, so parts of Europe are at risk. Now, if the Greenland ice sheet melted, that would be 6.5 meters of water. If the West Antarctic ice sheet melted, that would be 6 to 8 meters of water. If there were 10 meters of water, that would flood about 25% of the US population because we have an awful lot of people living on the coastline. People like to live on the coast. So yeah, so this yellowish portion, then that would be all people would have to move. So Florida basically would be mostly underwater. Okay, so if all the ice melts and all the water on Earth is in the ocean pretty much, except for a little bit of fresh water in our lakes. Anyway, water will perhaps be over 200 feet higher, around 70 meters. Now, part of that is due to just plain old expansion. Water expands as it gets warmer. And so that would actually explain about 1/3 of the increased volume. But yes, cities would get slowly taken away. I'm not sure these are quite in the right order, but the idea is there. Gradually, cities will be overcome. Okay, so National Geographic has these excellent pictures, so you'll want to spend some time looking at them by pausing the video. But goodbye, East Coast. This would be if all the water, if all the ice melted, this is what would happen. And you can see that we no longer have a Florida. And you can see in California, what is this blue thing? That's the Central Valley. Central Valley of California would be flooded, including where I grew up for many years, close to Sacramento. Anyway, so yes, and this is all those places which are farmed right now. So the water would come in through the Golden Gate, up the Sacramento River, the American River, and into the valley. Okay, so anyway, so enjoy looking at all these. China, this is that flat part of China that would flood. South America, notice the change in the Amazon. It would flood with salt water. Africa, not too different. Europe, quite a bit of difference up in the north. Also, the seas would expand. The Black Sea, the Mediterranean would spill over into the Black Sea and join with the Caspian Sea, perhaps. Australia would have an ocean, an interior sea. And Antarctica would just have mountains popping out down below, and there might be greenery. Okay, so that's the end of this portion. So I'm going to click off, and then we will start the next part.